Noted as being one of the most haunted houses in the world, Car Dario on the Grand Canal in Venice has earned its title. Locals refer to the building as the House of No Return. Dating back as far as the 15th century, a string of deaths have contributed to the building's reputation. Giovanni Dario, secretary to the Venetian Senate, diplomat and merchant, called Cardario home. After his death in 1494, the house was passed on to his daughter, Marietta, and it was her suicide that began the macabre tradition of deaths in the house. Following her husband's bankruptcy and the tragic death of her son, who was killed by assassins in Crete, Marietta took her own life. The place was then bought by a merchant, Abit Abdul, who soon became bankrupt shortly after purchasing the house. More recently, in 1963, the Italian tenor Mario del Monaco wanted to buy it, only to have a car accident, and ultimately had second thoughts about becoming the house's new owner. A few years later, a Count, Filippo Giordano del Lane from Turin, bought the property, but ended up dying inside the house when he was stabbed by a Croatian sailor named Raul Blasic, whom he was in a relationship with. Blasic moved to London and also went on to be stabbed to death himself. The palace went on to be purchased by Christopher Kit Lambert, manager of the rock band The Who. He is said to have fallen in love with the romance and melancholic air of the property. The environment allegedly exasperated his drug addiction, and friends stated that the manager regularly stayed in a local hotel to escape the ghosts which haunted his home. The manager went on to be arrested for the possession of drugs and led to his financial collapse. 3 years later, Kit sold the property onto a Venetian businessman, Fabrizio Ferrari, who moved in with his sister Nicoletta, who went on to become the victim of a strange road accident which is believed to have not had any witnesses, alas adding to another layer of the mystery regarding the house. Despite there seeming to be no stopping the house, adding more deaths to its list, including an additional suicide and a heart attack, the house today is privately owned and not available to the public, but the owner has an agreement with the Venetian Art Board to hold new art exhibitions. There are many legends and mysteries surrounding the house. Locals suggest it is built on a Templar cemetery. Others say it's due to the call of an amulet from another nearby palace. Whatever the reason, it's undeniable that the house has a horrible history. Born on the 16th of November 1922 in Sicily, Salvatore Giuliano was a self-styled Robin Hood bandit. He rose to prominence in 1943 during the Allied invasion in Sicily, a major campaign which took place during World War II, in which the Allied took Sicily from the Axis powers, the National Fascist Party, and Nazi Germany. The collapse of Italy necessitated German troops replacing the Italians in Italy and, to a lesser extent, the Balkans, resulting in 1/5 of the entire German army being diverted from the east to southern Europe until the end of the war. A Sicilian nationalist looking to end Italian rule, Giuliano was known for stealing from wealthy landlords and redistributing the accumulation to peasants and the less fortunate. But in September 1943, Giuliano sealed himself as an outlaw after shooting and killing a police officer who attempted to arrest him for black market food smuggling. At the time, 70% of the food supply in Sicily was in fact from the black market. Giuliano maintained a band of subordinates for most of his career as a bandit, who assisted with his fight against the fascism running rampant in southern Italy and attacking police as often as they sought him. But as World War II was coming to an end, Giuliano shifted his support from the peasants to the mafia and landowners who could provide the funds he needed to build his guerrilla army. The widespread international press coverage Giuliano attracted made him an embarrassment to the Italian government, and throughout his banditry, up to 2,000 police and soldiers were deployed against him. The beginning of the end began in January 1950, when a Sicilian carabiniere, Giovanni Lobianco, coerced Giuliano's treasurer, Benedetto Minnesola, into betraying the bandit. Minnesola set up band members to be captured by the authorities, a plan that was supposed to take place over several months up until April of the same year, leaving Giuliano with no active operatives left. Minnesola was then able to persuade Aspano Pisciotta to betray his closest friend. A day and place was arranged to assassinate the bandit chieftain, but Giuliano was notified via a letter of the plans to put an end to his reign. With Salvatore Giuliano still trusting in his friend, Aspano Pisciotta, he allowed the man to stay in the house that he was holed up in. After both men lay down ostensibly to sleep, Pisciotta waited until Giuliano was asleep, then shot Giuliano twice, killing him instantly. Pisciotta fled and went into hiding. He was eventually caught in December of the same year, and ended up perishing under mysterious circumstances 4 years later in a Palermo prison after drinking a poisoned cup of coffee. These events may not be strange in and of themselves, but many conspiracy theorists have insisted that Giuliano faked his own death and disappeared, allegedly to the US. The body, which was supposedly identified by none other than Giuliano's mother, is said to have been too short to have been Giuliano's. Other stories say that both his mother and sister fainted upon hearing word of his death, so his family never officially identified his remains. In 2012, Giuliano's body was exhumed from his resting place, and DNA tests show a 90% likelihood that the body was in fact his. Still, others are certain that Giuliano found his freedom and still lives, making him an impressive 98 years old at the time of this video. True or not, I think it's safe to say that the legend of the last Robin Hood-style bandit lives on. On April 24th, 1950, Bruno Facchini, a hard-working and honest factory worker in Varese, northwest of Milan, was working a late shift. Bruno stepped outside in order to check on the factory's circuit breakers to ensure that they hadn't been damaged during a thunderstorm. Close to the factory doors, he saw brightly glowing lights and went to investigate. As he approached the light, Bruno quickly realized that the light he was seeing was being projected from a circular craft hovering above the building. The object appeared to have a kind of ladder descended from a rectangular opening on the underside of the ship. Back on the ground, Bruno saw what he described as two small, unidentified figures wearing a diving suit-like attire and helmets with a window and some type of breathing apparatus affixed to the front, not too dissimilar to what would be used during the first moon landing in July of 1969. Naturally terrified, the man turned and ran. As he fled, Bruno reported being struck by a beam of light, which he states threw him to the ground, thus allowing the two small figures accompanying the UFO to climb back onto the ladder. Once on board, the hatch closed and the craft proceeded to fly away into the night. The following day, the man filed a police report, which resulted in investigators finding burn marks on the ground, as well as a green metallic substance. Analysis later found the mysterious substance to contain copper and tin. But this was not the end of Bruno Facchini's experience. A week later, Bruno stated that his back had become inexplicably bruised, starting out as black before phasing to yellow. Adding to the evidence of what had happened, he was experiencing pain on his neck, supposedly in the area where the craft's light beam had come into direct contact with his skin. With no concrete evidence to back up Bruno's claim of what happened to him, virtually being impossible to prove or disprove, the case remains one of Italy's well-known UFO encounters. 30 years later, in 1981, Bruno Facchini gave an interview about the incident and stated that, even after all this time that had passed, he was still suffering psychological trauma, as well as physical manifestations he believes were related to the incident. Continuing to suffer from hot flushes and fevers, he also acknowledged the eerie similarities between the suits of the beings he saw and that of the moonwalking astronauts, despite the incident occurring 20 years before the Apollo spacecraft left the safety of our blue planet. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to these Italian mysteries. If you are in fact Italian, please forgive my pronunciation of names and places. This video sincerely comes from a place of love for the country and culture, and was a little bit difficult to research on. If you have any mysteries you'd like for me to cover, please send them my way at behindthemythtales@gmail.com. Take care, friends! Giovanni Dario, secretary to the Giovanni Dario. Giovanni Dario, secretary. Fabrizio. The widespread Palermo? In a Palermo prison. These events may not be strange in and of themselves, but many These events may not be strange in and of oh my god. Making him an impressive name. Making him